Listen up or run for cover. Dropping knowledge from the people who have it to the people who need it. The real Brad Lee is dropping
What it is, Brad Lee back again with another episode of Dropping Bombs. Today in the studio, well, not in the studio, but lucky enough through virtual technology, I've got Congressman Dan Crenshaw in the house. Man, if you guys don't know who this guy is, he is a congressman out of Texas, badass former Navy SEAL up there, I think, kicking ass, taking names. And Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be with you, Brad.
Dude, I personally think I'm talking to one of the future presidents of the United States. You got any ambition whatsoever?
I appreciate that. I'm getting ambitions for my next election. That's about as far as we take it in politics. You know, speaking about politics, seriously, you have to think about it as opportunities come. It's not like other career paths where you want to map out a pipeline of ascension, the way I would have done in the military or the way you might do in, climbing a corporate ladder or whatever it is. It's unhealthy actually to do that in politics because I think it changes you. I think it makes you think about things in unhealthy ways. Maybe not take risks when you should take risks, maybe take risks when you shouldn't take risks. Better to stick to your principles, stick to who you are, and just win the next election.
Dude, didn't you just win the last election? I mean, you guys, you came in at 2018, correct? And it's every 2 years?
Yeah, every 2 years. Yep. So I'm running every 2 years, ran in this last one. We doubled our margin of victory, so that was good.
Yeah, you whooped them handily.
We did. And it speaks to, I think it speaks to the future of success for Republicans. And so my district, long-time Republican district, well, although it used to be held by a Democrat, you might know, Charlie Wilson. That was back in the days when Democrats believed different. Democrats were pro-gun, pro-God, maybe more of a labor party than they are now. The Democrat Party has changed dramatically, and so Texas used to be like a very Democrat state. Let's not forget, but conservative, right? There used to be conservative Democrats. So Charlie Wilson was one of those. And for those listeners who are like, okay, Dan, I don't know who Charlie Wilson is. Remember the movie Charlie Wilson's War with Tom Hanks? He's quite the character, and I am his successor in the 2nd district here in Texas. So longtime red district became more competitive in 2018 as the blue wave hit across America, and we still won it by 7 points, but Trump won this district this year by 1 point. I won it by just under 14. So there's a method for success here. And I think it's this. Look, conservative policies are popular. It turns out people generally like their freedoms, less regulation, not being told what to do, not control over their healthcare or every aspect of their life. They generally like borders that are secure. They like us standing up to China. Et cetera, et cetera. But they don't. But just don't be a jerk, okay? And I try to do that. I try to forcefully fight for conservative principles without spewing red meat. And there's a difference. And I'm sure any Democrats listening to this would say, no, Dan, you're spewing red meat all the time. And I have to remind them, it's like, well, there are. No, I'm not really. I mean, compared to what could be spewed. I don't like to talk in terms of slogans. I like to talk in terms of facts and reasonable arguments. And but I do it forcefully, and I fight across a lot of different battlefronts. So you can't accuse me of really ceding any ground or running away from any fights, whether they be cultural fights or political fights or policy fights. But there's a way to do it that doesn't turn off a lot of people, and I think Republicans need to learn that.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll get into politics here in a little bit. First, let me go back a little bit. So you were born in the UK, correct? Your dad was kind of a traveling petroleum engineer.
exactly. Yeah, both my parents are American. I have no connection to the UK really, except for the fact that, I mean, in a sense, we all do. um, but they just happened to be living in Aberdeen, Scotland at the time. My dad was working for, what was that? Geo, I think, something like that. That doesn't exist anymore. And so I don't remember it at all. I grew up in Houston. We moved back to Houston by the time I was 3 or 4. So my first memories are really growing up here.
Right on. Well, Texas is obviously a kick-ass state, but then you graduated, I noticed, high school in Bogota, Colombia, no?
Yeah, I spent all my high school there, all 4 years. Funnily enough, like as far as classmates and old friends go, the ones I keep in contact with are all my Colombian classmates. And, like 1 or 2 Americans, really 1 American that I went to high school with. But it was mostly all Colombians. Our graduating class was about 108 people, I think. Primarily Colombian. I went to high school in 98 to 2002, and Colombia was not a safe place for expats back then, or for anybody really, not just expats. It's much better now, worth a visit. So I go back to high school reunions, still keep in touch with a lot of folks from there, as opposed to like college where I had no friends from college.
Were you there with the like cartels, the Pablo Escobar and all that? Was that when you were there, or before or after?
No, that's more early mid 90s. After Pablo was killed, I think in 93. The Cali Medellin cartels took over. They were less. If you watch the show Narcos, it's actually a pretty good historical representation of what happened. I believe it's filmed all in Colombia. It's a really cool show. But that they were less aggressive, I guess, less willing to start a war with the government. And so they sort of maintained an under the radar presence. But then that gave way to the FARC. The Marxist revolutionaries that still exists today, but to a much lesser extent. But they were very powerful back then. They were more into kidnappings, more overt warfare with the government, and so they kind of took over a lot of the drug trade as well. And they've sort of been beaten back over the years. There's still an issue. It's not just them. There's other guerrilla groups as well, and so you could never travel between cities when I was there. So I didn't get to explore a lot of the country. I still traveled a little bit. Our school field trips would be in places like we'd go to the Amazon, we'd go to Cartagena, Providencia, which is like a cool island just off the coast. I did soccer tournaments in random cities like Manizales, because I played soccer there. So it was a really fascinating time. You as expats, we would have to have armored vehicles. We didn't always have an armored vehicle. We got one after a bullet went through our car. So
wow.
I wasn't in it at the time, but my stepmom was. And after that, we had a little bit additional security, but it was definitely an interesting time. The presidents at the time, President Pastrana, his son was one of my classmates and on the soccer team with me. And so our soccer games were surrounded by armed guards. Like it was a different high school experience, I gotta say.
Yeah, I mean, there's not normal, American sports living in a kind of a crazy country. So I'm trying to get back to what made you decide, hey, I want to go freaking be a SEAL. What caused
I wanted
you
to do that probably before I'd even moved to Colombia. When I was in middle school, I got that bug to just like a lot of kids do. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a Navy SEAL. And I just kind of kept that dream going, which is a pretty consistent story when you talk to SEALs. It's hard to make it through SEAL training if you didn't always want it. And in my book, I call this having no plan B. It's just there is only one direction I'm going, and I'm going to die or get hurt so badly I can't go that direction anymore before I quit. It's kind of the only mentality you can have if you're going to make it through BUD/S. And that dream started because I read one of Dick Marcinko's books, his first book, Rogue Warrior. He's kind of the first SEAL he's the founder of SEAL Team 6. He's a sort of a mythical character in the SEAL teams. He's still around today. I haven't heard much out of him in a long time, but he was the first one to really capitalize on the SEAL book endeavors. And I read that and I was hooked. So I just made every decision from then on to join the SEAL teams.
Now, I liken the SEAL team because, again, very difficult to actually achieve and get your trident. The mindset has to be incredible. This is mainly an entrepreneur show. I like to kind of equate it to starting a business. Most businesses don't make it either. What would you say if someone's starting a business and how do they make sure that they have that mentality? Anything you developed over the years to just have that focus, that freaking laser focus?
Yeah, so I'll expand on the no plan B mentality a little bit. And this is a chapter in my book, Fortitude. Let me give you a shameless plug there for it. And no plan B it means don't quit. But it also doesn't mean, and this is maybe more applicable to the business environment, what it doesn't mean is continue along a path that is destined for failure either. If a business isn't working and you divest or you go a different direction, you don't need to view that as quitting. Only you know what quitting is. And quitting is quitting on yourself. It means that you could have given it a little bit more effort. You know that you could have made decisions that were better, but you didn't, maybe because you just were lazy or you didn't put in the work or the research or whatever it is, but only you know that. And so you got to define quitting properly. And I got to define what living a plan A is versus living a plan B. And living a plan A is living with purpose and living with intent and pursuing something that you know is right in your heart and not giving up on that. It doesn't necessarily mean don't ever change directions, because sometimes, especially in business, it might be smart to change directions. And you've got to know yourself and know the situation well enough to be able to distinguish between the two.
So you did 5 tours total, correct?
Correct.
5 tours. The third tour is when you got blown up by an IED. Lost your eye, lost both eyes, actually. Tell me about that. How'd that, like when you woke up blinded, what'd you think? What'd you feel? They were telling you weren't going to see again. How'd that hit you?
Well, it wasn't a great day. It was so I'll walk you through it. The blast, this was in Helmand province. I was actually primarily operated in Kandahar province throughout that deployment. This was maybe month 7, I think, of that deployment. And this was around June 15th, 2012. We were on sort of a last minute mission. And our only time in Helmand, because of just the nature of that particular mission, was to leave a Marine Special Operations unit that had been in a firefight, and the higher ups wanted to maintain presence there for whatever reasons, and in hindsight, probably not very good reasons. But that's kind of besides the point. If there's ever a fight that we can get in as SEALs, we generally raise our hand and ask to be in it. The broader policy implications or strategic implications aren't that important to us. And this is just something. I mean, they're important, but you just have to understand the mentality of a SEAL. Like, we're always looking for a fight. So I say that because the point is, I don't want to blame anybody else for what happened to me. I didn't have on that mission. Just my role in that platoon at the time was not one where I had to be on it. I wanted to be, and despite the fact that maybe it wasn't even a good strategic reason for us to even be going. Okay. And so I just have to distinguish between those two things a little bit, because I don't want to blame anybody for what happened. Now, generally speaking, in Helmand and southern Kandahar, the biggest threat isn't necessarily small arms fire or insurgents running around trying to shoot you, because they're not very good shots and they're not very tactically proficient. And they're usually shooting at us and running. But what they're very good at is laying IEDs literally everywhere. Pretty easy to make. It takes a couple pieces of wood, some wire, a battery, a detonator, and an explosive charge to make, just out of some basic fertilizer compounds. So these are rather easy to make. and they like to put them everywhere. And that's our biggest threat, because they maim you. They don't necessarily kill you, and they force our movements. We have to walk in single file, even though that's not a tactically proficient way to walk and patrol. You generally want to walk in, in maneuver elements so that you can support each other and flank the enemy. But you can't do that in these areas, because you can only walk in places that have been cleared.
Do you think they're smart enough to know that, and that's why they place them, or are they just placing them haphazardly to kill people?
Both. I mean, because it's smart to place them haphazardly, because it creates chaos, right? It makes it impossible to anticipate where they might be. It's easy to think, well, there's probably some in a doorway, or there's probably some along this path. But when your guys start getting blown up in the most random places ever, we had one go off on a hilltop in the middle of nowhere. Now, it went low order, meaning the main charge didn't blow up, so the guys who sat on it didn't get hurt. But this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. It is the most random of places. And so once you figure that out, you're like, you just have to plan for them being everywhere. The one that hit me was sort of just in the middle of a courtyard. Houses in Afghanistan in the rural areas are, they look like mud huts with compounds, like they're walled compounds with, mud walled rooms inside, and then courtyards where they have their animals and, store their farming equipment or whatever they have in there. And these abandoned, and a lot of them are abandoned, and that's where the most likely is that there's going to be IEDs laid around them, because Taliban will use them as fighting positions, and then retreat back and then arm the IEDs, so that when you take over their fighting position, there's IEDs in it, which is basically what happened to us. And so we're clearing this place, and one of my interpreters was responding to somebody who called him over, and then all of a sudden it felt like I got hit by a truck. And so the last thing I remember, well, not the last thing, this thing didn't knock me unconscious, so I remember the entire thing. But basically, Rahman, he's an Afghan interpreter. He's being called over, and all of a sudden an explosion hits. And it's not clear to me at the time what exactly happened. It just felt like I got hit by a truck. You get knocked out. You're not sure what knocked you out. My first reaction was to just feel my legs, and I still felt them, so that was a good sign. But I still knew I'd been hit by something. It didn't take me long to figure out what had happened, because then I could hear Rahman like in pain, like moaning, and this very, people need to realize when in the movies, when a soldier gets blown up or shot or wounded, they scream a lot, but that's not how it is in real life. You don't have the energy to scream. You just been mortally wounded. So screaming is not what you do. It's more like a real visceral groan. It's like pain manifested into sound. It's a very memorable sound. And so I knew exactly what had happened. And he lost all 4 limbs right away. He was a smaller guy, and it was a fairly large IED.
Is he the one that detonated it?
Yeah, by stepping on it. Yep.
Ouch.
And so I took all the fragmentation from that just directly head on. So my face looked like I'd been hit by like a shotgun. A bird shot is sort of what my face looked like, and the rest of my body looked like that as well. Probably the more severe wounds from the waist down, just because that's closer to the IED. Luckily, I was wearing Kevlar boxers, so it was just a little trick that we had, which were enough to at least save that part of me. But my knees and legs were pretty torn up, and my face was torn up as well. But obviously, the most permanent damage was to my eyes, because a bird shot to the face, even if it doesn't structurally damage your face, well, you can just imagine how much damage that does. And so I was blind. I didn't know why I was blind. I just thought there was dirt in my eyes. And I sort of lived with that mentality for the next few weeks, frankly, like knowing I was blind, but not believing it, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
Which was maybe a coping mechanism, maybe this sort of self-deception, by the intentional self-deception. And that was healthy, frankly. So 45 minutes later, a medevac helicopter comes, and I get up and I'm able to walk to it, blind, but again, just firmly believing I'm not blind. Again, maybe to just save myself some insanity. They put me into a medically induced coma right away on the helicopter, and I don't wake up for maybe 5 days. I wake up in Germany. And by the time I wake up, I'd already been in a couple surgeries. They removed my right eye because it was so badly damaged that it was the medically proficient thing to do was to just remove it, enucleate it in medical terms is what they call it. And my left eye was badly damaged, and they didn't think I'd see again out of it, for good reason. Lots of shrapnel had shot through it, and I couldn't see out of it. It caused a cataract. So, a cataract, for people who don't know, you hear about them all the time. Old people get them. It basically means your lens in your eye, which is about in the middle of your eye, structurally speaking, has deteriorated to an extent that you need to remove it. It's not a big deal for somebody in their 60s. It's a surgery that happens all the time. They just remove the lens out of your eye, and maybe they replace it with a fake lens. With mine, that lens was just destroyed. So you can't just replace it. My iris is broken, still is, causes a lot of issues, especially driving at night. My retina is pretty badly damaged. I've got weird blind spots and flashes all over it that are annoying. But I wear a contact like I'm wearing now, that is a miracle contact. It pretty much corrects my vision to 20/20. It's not perfectly 20/20 vision because of all the damage that I just talked about, but it's a miracle that I can see it all.
Well, dude, you didn't need Kevlar underwear, bro. You got balls of steel, because when you woke up, you ended up going back 2 more times. Like, dude, were you just like gung-ho like a son of a bitch, or what? Wouldn't you just think to yourself, holy shit, that's enough of that? You went back 2 more times.
Yeah, maybe again, it's hard to explain to people the SEAL mentality. It really is about going back. And I didn't really get to go back the way I wanted to go back. I didn't go back to Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria. The roles that they would allow me to go back in were more in the intelligence operations kind of roles, which I was perfectly happy with. I mean, I just didn't want to be out of my life. I mean, it's our society, I think, babies veterans a little bit too much these days. These poor souls, these poor victims of these politicians' wars. We need to stop that nonsense. We're an all volunteer force, and we do what we do because we love it. And I love that life.
Dude, I'm surprised. I'm surprised you say that, because here's what I always say. I think if you get hurt to the degree where you lose something, amputate a limb, I believe, and again, I've never heard anyone say what you just said. I believe veterans that go over there and serve and get that kind of damage, they should never have to pay taxes again. That should be their payment from us, the American people.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that either. But we're taking care of. We're also.
Go ahead.
I'll say, we spend hundreds of billions of dollars on veteran services. It could be done more efficiently, and those services could be given more accurately. We could always be improved upon. But I'm speaking more to this generalized view of veterans as victims. I think we've overdone it, and I think a lot take advantage of that. To be perfectly honest, it's one thing to say what you just said about a veteran who was wounded in action, Purple Heart, served, and now has severe disabilities. But unfortunately, we've enlarged that safety net to many who have never been in combat and have no such disabilities. And so one of the things I talk about in my book is I'll never forget being in the classroom on my way out of the Navy, going through what is a typical out processing for medical retirement. And out of 20 or 30 people in that classroom, I was the only one who was actually wounded. I was the only one who was actually wounded in combat. Nobody else was. And everybody else got up with all 10 fingers and 10 toes and 2 arms and 2 legs and a brain that works, and walked out of there all hoping they could get 100% disability. So our system doesn't exactly work the way it's supposed to. The other thing I note in my book is how we were all pushed to get on Social Security disability insurance. And most Americans would think that disability insurance from Social Security is meant for people who are disabled and can't work. It's not meant for just some kind of disability. I have a disability. I'm not disabled. There's nothing preventing me from working, and there was nothing preventing anybody in that classroom from working. And so we just need to rethink sometimes how we look at things and make sure we're targeting the right people when it comes to veteran benefits. Because the truth is, I think there's a lot of veterans who get the care that they need, and there's a lot of veterans that get too much, and just I think we're always trying to find that right balance, to be honest. And I think that the culture of victimhood that has pervaded our country and the world, frankly, as Western civilization as a whole, and I think we've seen it in stark terms in the year 2020, has also invaded the mindset of our veteran community, and we've got to acknowledge that and stop it and reverse it. We are not victims, and we are people who can overcome anything. And getting the right help to the right people, I think, is huge. And I'm working on some interesting things along those lines as well. Again, it's not like I'm saying, hey, just tough it out. I'm saying there's better ways to do it. And one of the first steps to doing it is a mentality shift.
Well, tough it out and toughen up are two different things, in my opinion. I think some should toughen up. Again, I think who's the judge? But I mean, I think if you're actually hurt or have a disability or basically sacrificed for the country, might as well give you tax-free status. In my opinion, we'll get to the politics, but I think we're wasting tax dollars. I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, but why not just say, hey, you guys are just free. Now, were you with your wife prior to, when did you meet your wife?
Yeah, I met her in my second time through Buds, because my first time I broke my leg. So I met her as I was recovering. So yeah, we were together. We were not married, but we were together. She was by my side during the 2012 incident. And she's been on every deployment with me.
What does she think? What does she think of the patch? Does she think badass?
Yeah, I mean, she better. So the patch.
I think it helped you get elected, bro. I think it helped you get elected. Like, dude, you look like a badass, and that's who we want in government: real American badasses.
I appreciate that. It probably did. So the patch for me was like in the SEAL teams, I always wore my Trident eye. So that's this, right? Like that's that thing.
Oh, dude, that's badass too. Look at that shit.
Yeah. So it's like, which one do you choose? But the thing is when you're and I would wear a patch more for fun. Or if I had to dress up real nice, like a patch made more sense. It just looks more formal. And so when I got into politics, I decided to just consistently wear the patch. Also because that I mean, for you to understand what it is and what's even going on, you have to know my story, and you have to look really close, and it's very distracting. So, and it looks weird in pictures and videos. So, as a public figure, the patch makes a lot more sense. Because then I don't have to answer strange questions. Like if somebody's meeting me for the first time, when I'm, starting to run for politics, and I'm like, hi, my name's Dan Crenshaw, former Navy SEAL, I'm running for Congress. If I'm wearing a funny eye, it distracts them. Because even if I wear one that looks natural, even if I wear an eye that looks natural, it doesn't look natural. It's obviously not real.
Yeah.
And so it's the patch tells the story, and politics is about telling your story as quickly as possible. So that's sort of why the patch became the go-to mechanism.
Yeah, if you guys are listening to the audio version of this and don't know what Dan Crenshaw looks like, he looks like fucking Russell Crowe. You hear that a lot?
Yeah, I get that a lot. Gladiator Russell Crowe, not like modern day Russell Crowe.
Yeah, no, Gladiator. I don't know what the hell happened to Russell unless he's just getting into character. But boy, yeah, Gladiator Russell Crowe. So you did 2 more tours. You got out. You ended up going back to Harvard, or did you decide to get into politics before you went to Harvard?
No, I had no intention of going into politics. I mean, I thought about it. I think my wife and I maybe would talk about it in the back of our minds. Maybe one day.
Why though?
Because I did want to stick.
What made you? Because again, you went from, man, I got to get in some wars, and now, man, I got to get into politics, which technically are even worse wars, in my opinion. Worse.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. I miss the old wars a lot, to be honest. So I went to Harvard, to the Kennedy School, immediately after. I mean, I think my last day in the military was technically September 1st, 2016, and I was in classes in Harvard. It's Labor Day weekend, so it's like right then. The intention was policy, right? I wanted to go to a policy degree. I wanted to, I've got the benefits from the VA and what's actually called vocational rehab. So, they're going to pay for your school. So you might as well use it. And it's a good transition to civilian life. And I'm not sure what I wanted to do in civilian life. I did know that I wanted to stick to some kind of government service. Not really sure what that was going to mean, but I thought maybe I'd figure it out at Harvard. Never really did, to be perfectly honest. I had a good time there. Good learning experience.
Does everybody at Harvard walk around, thinking they're cool as shit just because they're going to Harvard?
Yes, 100%.
That's what I would.
I'd be walking around. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I'd be walking around.
I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. Again, the reason I say it was so beneficial for my current job is because, I was in a liberal bubble there. And so I know how my political opponents think. I know what policies they land on. I know why they land there. And they know nothing about me. They know nothing. They're not that interested in learning about why conservatives think the way conservatives think. It's kind of a fascinating conversation to have with them sometimes, at least the open-minded liberals who are like, wow, I never really heard it that way. And I'm like, yeah, because you never listen to us, right? You create caricatures of us. And, you think that we're all a bunch of right-wing Looney Tunes Nazis. And turns out there's actually, I would say, a pretty hefty intellectual conservative base. And maybe the problem with a lot of Republicans is they rarely tap into that in an effective way to explain why we believe what we believe. But, getting back to like sort of the personal story here. Yeah, I left Harvard, graduated, was kind of searching for what that next step would be like. And happened to just be in a meeting with and now a good friend of mine, a guy named John. He works for Senator Cotton. And just doing kind of your networking meetings, really. That's all it was. And, again, looking for that next step. And he's like, well, why don't you just run for Congress? And I was like, okay, yeah, just like that, just run for Congress. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I thought about it, maybe one day, maybe I'll get into that. But like, I don't know how to run for Congress. I don't know what race to get into. It doesn't seem like a viable option. And he's like, well, where are you from? And I told him what district would be my home district in Houston. And so he quickly looked it up. And he said, well, yeah, the current Congressman, Ted Poe, announced retirement yesterday. So it's an open seat now. And that's how it started. It was just a very serendipitous meeting that, because I'm not following who's, at that time in my life, I'm not following who's retiring. I don't really care. Because I'm not looking for that as my next step. And so just the fact that we met at the right time, at the right place, and with the right guy sort of sent me on that journey. And then literally, I think within a week or two, started a campaign out of my parents' game room in Houston, in spring specifically. And the rest is history. We had 3 months to do it because that was in November of 2017. The primary in Texas is in March. So then a few months, just did everything I could to create a game plan, and started off pretty rocky, as you can imagine, because you don't have any money, you don't know what you're doing. But I did understand, kind of a basic military mindset of how to structure objectives. And the objective in a campaign is to just get a lot of people to know who you are and to kind of like you. So if I was going to give advice to anybody running for an office, that's the name of the game. People have to know who you are and they have to kind of like you. Just kind of. just like you enough so that they like you better than the other guy. And that's putting it in the simplest of terms, but it's also hard to do. That's why you need a lot of money, because for people to know you, you have to advertise to them.
What it cost you? What it cost you to run for that seat?
By March, we'd only raised maybe $200,000. So I guess that's relatively cheap. One of my 9 opponents spent $6.5 million on that particular race. So money doesn't buy it all the time, but I managed to get second place in that particular race and I got second place, beat that particular opponent who got third place by 155 votes. So every vote really counts. So that sent me into a runoff for the primary, which we won pretty handedly because my momentum really took off in the latter part of that race, like the last week of early voting, where people finally started to see me and realize who I was. And so from there, it was fairly smooth sailing, still difficult campaign, but a typical congressional, I think we've raised in this last race, like almost $15 million, or I don't know. I'd have to ask.
Did you spend it all?
Exactly. Yeah, we ended up saving around $2 million. But you're raising money. When you got to spend money to make money, kind of like in business. You got to spend money on mail, for instance, that asks people for money. It's an effective way to raise money. You have a full-time staff for 2 years. So, a lot of that gets spent on there and TV ads and things like that. But I do fundraise probably better than most.
And who backs it? Just other Republicans?
What do you mean?
Like who's putting up that $13 million? Just a bunch of donors?
Yeah. Lots of individual donors. Our average donation is still like $40, $50. Wow. I could only take, if you wanted to donate to our campaign right now, you can personally only give me $2,800. So that's the maximum. So you've got to have a lot of different donors. It's not like somebody can write me $1 million check for my campaign.
2,800, you say, is the max?
Yep. At CrenshawForCongress.com, in case anybody's wondering.
Dude, I'm gonna donate $2,800 if that's my max. I want to see you not only win again, but dude, I want to see you end up running for president. I'll bet you $50 you'll be president if you try, because, dude, people are tired of the bullshit, don't you think? Well, apparently not, unless there's like actual voter fraud, which again I don't doubt it at all. But like, how does Biden hang out in the basement? He has 14 people at his events, and he wins more than any president in history. Like, do everybody in DC know that's bullshit, or is it not bullshit?
Yes. So here's my opinion on this. Well, and I think my opinion is based on the factual evidence. So, is there voter fraud? Definitely. Do many of the irregularities, and by irregularities I mean in some of the states that were contested, they changed a lot of rules that make voter fraud easier. It doesn't mean that there's systemic widespread voter fraud. If there was, some of the more conspiratorial voter fraud claims that I've heard, it would be much easier to catch. It'd be very hard to do that under the radar, especially with the way our election systems work. But what Democrats often try to do is they're going to reintroduce HR 1 here, which they passed out of the House last time, but the Senate blocked it, of course. Now we might not be so lucky. They're going to do things like, basically legalize ballot harvesting, make it legal for you to request mail-in ballots without having a reason to request a mail-in ballot. So just anybody can request it. You don't have to show an ID to request that ballot. Things like that are what cause a lot of these claims of voter fraud. Because what they're doing is, let me liken it to like drug trafficking. What you're basically doing is saying, look, you don't get to check the trunk of the car anymore, and then we're going to claim that there's nothing in the trunk. But it's like, well, you didn't let me check the trunk of the car, so how do you know that there's nothing in the trunk of the car? Okay, so that's the argument that we're having. So from the conservative perspective, like, I want the process to be airtight. I want to look at the process and say, I don't know how I would cheat. Now, I feel that way in Texas. Like, when I go through the voting process in Texas, I'm not sure how I would cheat, because, like, for me to request a mail-in ballot, I have to have a disability that, like, prevents me from leaving the home, or I have to be a senior citizen. Okay. And then I have to show some kind of, like, registration and proof of who I am to be able to do that. Like, there's mechanisms in place that make this a safe way and secure way to vote. Like, when I go to the voting booth, I don't know how I would cheat. I really don't. And that's comforting. I like that feeling. Even if it requires me to show an ID when I show up,
but
like, as if that's some
but Dan, I don't think the voter fraud is the voter cheating. I think it's the parties cheating. So you going to vote wouldn't be the one cheating. We all go, we cast our vote. The cheating happens, I think, on a higher level, like when they pull out a bunch of ballots in the middle of the night. I mean, I just don't understand how Biden could get more votes than in the history of the world than any president ever, but he had 31 people at his rallies. Like, it doesn't make sense. Now, again, I'm not saying that it's fraud, because I don't know shit, and I always tell people, dude, we don't know. We just think. But when I look at the government as a whole, I would say it's broken based on what I'm looking at. Would you agree?
It's possible. No, not necessarily. I think it's much harder to claim that, like, at the higher levels, like, corrupt election officials are inserting, like, 10,000 ballots. That is such an enormous operation to do so, that it's not been proven, and there's no evidence that it happened, right? But the evidence that's being presented for some of those claims is basically statistical in nature. So you've got, like, data analytics groups saying that this happened because of a data analysis, and it's just not very compelling. And there's also this other myth out there that no court ever looked at the evidence and they just dismissed it all based on standing and things. That's just not true. Like, I could send you lots of different court decisions over these past few months where the evidence was truly examined. And so, look, anything's possible, but for us to make the claims, like, we have to have some amount of evidence. And a lot of these claims were just not based in that. For instance, like, one of the big ones was, well, look, we've got a guy's affidavit saying he saw a USPS truck show up in the middle of the night, and it was odd, and, et cetera. But then you dig into it, and, you start asking some basic questions. Well, do you know what was in the truck? Well, no. Did you see anything else? No. And this guy's also happens to be, like, an amateur ghost hunter on the side. So, there was a lot of these kind of claims that were thrown out, and people latched on to it. I can only look at the evidence, right? That's just, I have to, before I say anything. So I think the more, that's why I started out with the process argument, because it really is the organic vote. I call it organic voter fraud versus systemic voter fraud. And so it still matters, because, look, I told you I won by 155 votes in one election. It's pretty easy to have organic voter fraud change 155 votes. So one of our new members of Congress won by 6 votes in Iowa. Wow. So every little bit of voter fraud counts. But I think we went down rabbit holes trying to prove and claim, like, these massive tens of thousands of votes, fraudulent votes, when in reality what we really need to be focusing on is the argument of, you have to make the integrity of the election self-evident. That's a really important word, meaning that when I look at the process, I don't see how I could cheat. What drives conservatives crazy is when we look at the process and we're like, okay, I see your process and I see how I could cheat if I wanted to. And that drives us nuts, because it's like, well, now you can imagine these instances of voter fraud. Whether they're true or not is a different question. You still have to prove it. But the fact is that the processes themselves need to be changed. They need to look more like Florida. They need to look more like Texas. Okay, because we have huge populations, and even Utah. Like, Utah does mail-in ballots, like, for everybody, but they have a process that they can trust. Okay, and they're just not doing that in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan. All of these states that everybody was contesting. That's really the problem. It's the process. So I don't. And let me get to the point about, is it possible Trump lost given his rallies versus Biden's rallies? And so we need to talk about that too. And I mentioned before, like, look, in my district in Texas, a red district, Trump barely won it. Won it by 1 point. I won it by just under 14 points. So there's 40,000 people in my district that voted for me, but not for Trump. And they probably voted down the line Republican too, because I was the best performing Republican on the ballot in my district, but most Republicans still won pretty handedly, except for Donald Trump. So yes, he has a very, very loyal, very, very loyal base. When you go to one of those rallies, there could be up to 50,000 people there, some of the bigger ones. A lot of those people go to all the rallies. And I also, people need to keep in mind, 50,000 people, that's a fraction of my district.
Yeah.
That's a fraction of one congressional district. So it's not everybody. And I was, just going door to door in a red district and seeing, long-standing Republicans tell you at the door that they're just not going to vote for Trump. So I wasn't as surprised at the election result as I think some people were. And, also got to keep in mind, like, Biden purposefully had 15 people at his rallies. Because they were virtue signaling about COVID the entire time. So they purposefully didn't allow people to come to those events. You just got to understand the way that a lot of Americans were thinking about the election. Unfortunately, they were not thinking about policy. They were more thinking about demeanor, because Donald Trump in the polling, if you ask people, which policies do you more align with, Donald Trump or Biden? And Trump would win that. But then you ask people the next question, which is, well, who do you prefer as a leader? And then Trump would lose by a lot. And that's just purely because of demeanor, which is why I started out saying, look, the path to winning is not getting rid of everything Trump stood for. I think what he stood for was pretty popular. It was just the way it was delivered, and people are sensitive to that. I wish they weren't. I think you should be voting based on pure policy. But that's not how a lot of people vote, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's polarizing, that's for sure. Well, let me ask you this. So walk me through, you just got elected for your first time. You show up. What are like, somebody's in charge, not you. A lot of us civilians think, oh, these guys are in charge. But when you show up, they're showing you around. They're telling you, sit there, go here, meet that person. Walk us through kind of new member orientation.
Yeah. It's like going to college. It's literally called orientation. You have a freshman class, and it's exactly like going to college. It's kind of funny in that sense. And you just got to make sure that you surround yourself with the right people. And this is probably one of the hardest things for new members to do. I felt very blessed going up to my first term because I went up with like some fame, I guess. And that meant that a lot of the best people wanted to work for me. So I didn't have a hard time, I think, getting a good team right off the bat. And definitely a good mix of a team. So you want people who understand how Congress works, how the intricacies of the system in DC work. And you want that balanced out with people who understand how your district works. And I think we have a great balance, people up in DC who are from the district, but who also know DC. And then we've got a great team on the ground here in Houston as well. So that's what you have to do. And then you just got to decide what kind of member you want to be. And different members do different things. Some members kind of want to be activists up there. And I discourage that sort of mentality because I tell them, like, look, if you're just up here to be an activist and just say the most flamboyant things to please the other activists, you're just an activist, and that's not your job anymore. Your job is to be more of a statesman, to understand the intricacies of policy and to understand that, you can't just tell people what they want to hear. You have to tell them some truth also. And I know from experience, like if I disagree with a lot of my supporters, boy, it lands me in some heat, but my job is to also tell them what I think, and I think to express some truth. You elect me because, supposedly I'm being elected because I have the judgment and wherewithal and policy knowledge to make these decisions and vote on your behalf. And some people don't really understand that. And this is the question in politics of whether you're a delegate or whether you're a trustee. And if you're just a delegate, then you just take a poll every time you have a vote, then what's really the point of you if you're never using your judgment to do that? I mean, you have to defend your arguments to people, and you have to know what you're talking about. So sometimes I think activism takes too much of a role. Other people come to Congress and want to just focus on one policy issue. Like they're super passionate about one policy issue, and they're going to really dive into that. And so they're just not as concerned with a lot of like the public communication and things, because, you know, they really care about corporate tax rates and like how we're going to fix that or something. And that's fine too. So you really got to look at it like, figure out your role and how you're going to be part of the team and the overall conservative movement. And I think that's what makes us effective. I think one of the problems that we're seeing in the Republican Party right now is a real tendency to turn inward and just like go rhino hunting is what I call it. Like everybody's looking for that rhino, and you know, he's not one of us because they disagreed on this one thing. And it's like, this is self-destructive. This is a very stupid way to move forward. I think, and we have a tendency to do it. I hope we grow out of that rather quickly. I think it's getting better, but it's always going to be a problem. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of what it's like.
Well, I think you shed some decent light on the fact that, you know, everybody's up in arms, or at least civilians that, oh, we got robbed, but you made a lot of sense. My question then would be like, for example, how when a new law gets, you know, created, are there tricky ass things slid in the back of them so that nobody really knew about, and or like you can't read all of those bills, can you? No one actually reads them all.
Yeah, I don't think members are being super honest with you when they say, "Oh, I couldn't read it." I mean, for these big omnibus bills, I don't like omnibus bills. Like, I'm not saying it's a good way to do things, but there's a reason it happens that way, and it's sort of part of the negotiation process. Look, I think it would be much healthier for our democracy if we voted on more discrete items one at a time. And,
yeah.
Say, let's use the COVID bills as a good example. It's like, because I was saying this for months leading up to when we finally passed this stupid COVID bill at the end of December, and now they want to do another one. But I was saying this for months. I'm like, look, we already agree that small businesses need relief, right? Like if we put that on the floor for a vote right now, like additional PPP funding would get passed. So why the hell don't we just put that on the floor? Okay, we agree on that. The Democrats who are in charge are like, well, no, because yes, we want that, but you want it too. So if you want that so badly, then we want this thing also. And so that's just sort of, and the reason that happens is because we're not in charge. Like, you know, we're just not as Republicans. So that's sort of why it happens that way, because of divided government. And now it's sort of the pros and cons of divided government. I mean, divided government is good. Checks and balances are good because it prevents one party from totally rolling over the other, like is unfortunately might happen now.
Why are Democrats in charge? There's just more of them.
Yeah. I mean, they just have a majority in the House. They have a majority now in the Senate. But because but prior to this election, they had a majority just in the House. So that means something. I mean, nothing will become law if the Democrat majority in the House doesn't want it to become law. Just the way nothing will become law if the Senate doesn't want it to become law. So the Democrats over the last 2 years passed a million things out of the House that just never even got voted on in the Senate because the Senate was held by Republicans. And of course, Trump would probably veto it anyway, even if it wasn't. But now they have slim majorities in both, and they have the presidency. So you'll actually see less negotiation as a result, which is not a good thing. But to explain like how things get slipped in like that, it's part of the negotiation, right? Because like a certain block of congressmen will say, look, I'm not voting for that thing, and you need my votes unless you get this thing in there. And so that's how it happens. I mean, it's not perfect. It's also hard to see how else you would do it in a democratic format and process.
Law by law.
I guess in an ideal world, I prefer that, but you can see how that quickly gets put aside because, you know, you wouldn't even get that done without, say, that block that wants to negotiate its thing in there. And so that's just how it happens. For better or worse, that's how it happens.
Yeah, but what would be the harm?
I wish it didn't happen that way. For what?
Sorry, what would be the harm to have less laws?
Yeah, well, as a conservative, I fully agree. So I mean, I agree. I just don't control it, right? I'm not the dictator. And again, COVID relief is the best example of that. Look, because I just want less. I think the better option for COVID relief is make sure that all businesses can be open, and target relief where it's needed. Like, I'm against direct cash payments. So they wanted that in there, and they're telling us, well, we're not going to put the PPP funding even on the floor for a vote unless you also agree to direct cash payments. And so this is just how it happens. It's a negotiation tactic. And so unless we literally made it enshrined into our Constitution that you could only pass small bills in a discrete fashion, which I don't think we'll ever do. Because to change the Constitution, you need obviously huge majorities. Unless that ever happened, you're always going to end up in this kind of negotiation tactic. I mean, it's hard to see how else it's going to happen.
You don't think there's any lobbying and crooked, shit going on?
Well, it depends what you mean by crooked.
Like for example,
there's definitely a lot.
Well, like for example, I mean, I definitely don't study politics, but you hear about certain things like so-and-so's brother just got a $500,000 job with Moderna. Well, he's an idiot though. Well, why would they hire the idiot or Hunter Biden and on all those things? It's like, who in the hell would do all that? Unless, of course, I'm funding you. You want to win next time, Dan. You're going to make sure that underage sex is legalized, and I'm some perv with a bunch of money. You don't think there's any of that going on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the examples you brought up are certainly real. I think there's a good case to be made that it was a corrupt relationship that Hunter Biden had with Burisma and some other Chinese investors. It's not illegal though. It would be illegal if there was an explicit quid pro quo, and not being able to prove that quid pro quo means that it's not technically illegal. But politically speaking, it's damaging. Certainly, unfortunately, not damaging enough to make Biden lose the presidency. But I think it does have. There's quite a few rules in place, like for lobbying, for instance. I mean, there's probably more rules in place on the ethics committee than there actually need to be. It's I find, just as I learn more about like what I can and can't do, what I find is that like these rules are clearly made for us to get each other in trouble, politically speaking, than they are to actually protect you, the taxpayer, from legitimate corruption. As a member of Congress, like you can't give me a gift that's worth more than $25. I can't ride on your private jet unless I like pay you for it.
So how does it happen?
It doesn't. We really don't. We're pretty careful about those things. That being said, it's also, I guess to your point, it's not illegal for one of my family members to take a great job, but it would be illegal for me to actually propose legislation that would help that family member's business. So there actually is.
What if it's accidental?
That actually. One of it's what?
What if it's accidental? Like, how the hell do you know what all your family members do?
Well, you should, if you're in this job. I mean, it has to be pretty specific, right? Like, because obviously, like if I'm going for corporate tax cuts, and I'm in favor of that, obviously it helps any business that anybody's in. So that's not really what we're talking about. But if I'm trying to pass a bill that's obviously very specific to a specific company, that could be highlighted as unethical behavior. So the way when people think about corruption in Washington, I do have to throw some cold water on a lot of these notions, because it's just from what I've seen, it's just not as true as people think it is. Are there lobbyists just crawling throughout DC? Yeah, of course there are, but I'm never under any pressure to listen to them. I really am not. I really, and I don't feel it. I mean, the lobbyists who talk to me, we already agree on things. The lobbyists who don't agree with me just don't even bother meeting with me. And frankly, maybe they should. It would make more sense, frankly, if lobbyists would try to persuade members, because I would love for energy industry lobbyists to try to persuade more Democrats, because I mean, our energy industry is getting killed right now because of Democrat ideology. So lobby is a place. People need to understand this. Like, I would never know if a certain bill is going to affect the restaurant industry unless the Association of Restaurants actually told me and met with me and said, like, look, this is what's going to happen. And you didn't see this. You didn't see this cause from this particular bill. This is what's going to happen if you guys do this. So that's a really important, what I call a legislative subsidy. We have to know those things. So it's not necessarily evil or corrupt that we meet with them, because they do represent interests that affect millions of people. And these people are my constituents. I tell everybody I meet, like, you are represented by a lobbyist in Washington. You may not know it, but you are, depending on where you work. If you're just a restaurant server, like, you're represented by somebody who talks to Congress about policy. If you work in Houston, oil and gas industry, like, you're represented by a lot of people. And that lobbying money comes from those workers, by the way. So this is the other thing people don't quite understand. It's like, you're just getting corporate money. Well, no, it's illegal for a corporation to give me money. What I can get is corporate PAC money, which means that you, as an industry and employees that work there, you give money to your PAC, on a yearly basis, and then that PAC hires a lobbyist to lobby on your behalf. And it's like, I'm not so sure there's anything wrong with that. I'm not so sure how else their voices are supposed to be heard, frankly, unless they get together in a pluralistic fashion and lobby and have their voice heard. So that money is coming from the people, really. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
What do you think the executive orders Biden's signing right now with the XL pipeline, and there was one more, how do you think that's going to make a big impact? Question number one. And question number two, why such the divide? I mean, isn't it kind of obvious? Isn't there science and evidence and common sense used where, like, if you do this is what's going to happen? Is it just the other party doesn't care that happens, or they don't believe that will happen?
Well, in this case, when it comes to the energy stuff and the environment stuff, they just don't care. I mean, because and I see evidence of this all the time. I mean, one of the ads that I was running before the election was during one of the Democrat debates, presidential debates, and the moderator asked Biden, look, if you ban fracking, or if whatever I can't remember exactly what he asked, but if you do this, does it bother, are you okay with the fact that it sacrifices hundreds of thousands of good paying jobs? And Biden goes, the answer is yes. So they do acknowledge it. Jen Psaki on one of her first press conferences said, in response to the Keystone pipeline being canceled and the 10,000 jobs that it would create, she said, well, they need to find other good paying jobs. So they absolutely acknowledge it. They just don't care, because they think, and this is where it's almost like a religious adherence to being against fossil fuels. This is where that comes in. They just don't care, and they firmly believe that the benefits of what they're doing will outweigh the long-term costs. And so they really are operating off of a different set of facts, frankly. And I don't think they're the correct set of analysis or facts or data, because I would argue, and I think rightfully so, that you're actually not going to help the environment by doing something like canceling the Keystone pipeline. That oil will get transported somehow. It is going to get transported in dirtier ways, maybe by truck or by train, also unsafe ways. Whereas the pipeline is a net zero emissions transportation mechanism. Also, you're getting it from Canada, or let's say you're just, so the other executive order was, banning new leases on federal lands or new permits on federal lands. So that's going to be really bad for Texas, cost us hundreds of thousands of jobs in the long run because of offshore leases. New Mexico is getting completely destroyed by this. And New Mexicans are pretty pissed because they're like, wait a second, we voted all Democrat. And we didn't, and I was like, hey, you should have believed them when they said they were going to ban this stuff, because in New Mexico, a lot of the fracking does occur on federal lands. And so you just ban that. And what are you even doing for the environment? The answer is nothing. The answer is nothing. Because first of all, one of the reasons the United States has decreased emissions so much over the last couple of decades is because of fracking, because natural gas is a cleaner burning energy. And even if it's just oil, like, look, our environmental regulations and just regulations in general are so much better and so much cleaner. Our companies are so much cleaner that you want America to be providing the world with energy, with oil and gas. Because if we don't, well, it's not like the global demand for energy just goes away. It's just provided by Russia or by Saudi Arabia or Iran or Venezuela. They don't really care about environmental regulations, if you haven't noticed. So you're actually going to probably increase global emissions. It's kind of the same argument with, like, look, let's make it harder for manufacturing to happen here through environmental regulations and through labor regulations. But all we end up doing is outsourcing that manufacturing to China because it's cheaper. And then they end up emitting way more carbon dioxide in their production than we would. But we're still consuming the same stuff. So it's like we're outsourcing these things. We're pretending like we're cleaner because of it, but in reality, we're not. And when you're talking about climate change and carbon dioxide emissions, you can only talk about it in terms of global emissions, whereas the left seems to only want to talk about it in terms of U.S. emissions. And that's a real fallacy in their thinking. So, I mean, I'll debate anybody on this topic because I'll destroy them, because they don't have their facts straight, and they don't have their cost-benefit analysis straight at all. So that's how I feel about the Keystone Pipeline and a lot of these other executive orders. It's a big deal for us in Texas.
Yeah, especially Texas. So out of curiosity, I know you got to get going. What's next? You just gonna run again, or are you gonna say, look, I'm moving up. I'm running for freaking. And by the way, what is moving up? Like, right now you're a congressman. What's the next level up where you have a little more authority, a little more power than the level up after that?
Yeah, in politics, from a congressman level, moving up would look like a Senate seat or a governorship. I mean, that's what it would look like. That I'm not so sure there's any other options besides that. But looking at the next election, I'm just running for this seat again.
And then the governor, that's like the top before you run for president, or a senator can run for, anyone can run for president. But I mean, like, what's the normal pathway?
Well, there isn't really a normal one, honestly. I mean, look at our past presidents. It's different every single time. Like, Obama was a junior senator when he ran. Bush, governor. What was Clinton right before he ran? I don't remember. He was definitely governor. At one point.
Governor of Arkansas.
Yeah, and then you look at Bush Senior. He was vice president before. Same with Biden. So, and then there's Trump. So it's there's no rule to this. There's not even a real pipeline, which is, like kind of when you asked me that earlier. It's politics really is about opportunity. It's what the people want at the right time, and you're either the right person at the right time or you're not. So it's not worth spending a lot of mental capacity overthinking it and thinking about that pipeline.
Who do you think the best president in the history of the United States has been?
Oh, well, it's kind of easy to, let me give you some easy answers. I mean, I think Reagan was phenomenal. I think Lincoln is obviously should be hailed as one of our greatest presidents. I think Calvin Coolidge is probably one that's not talked about a lot, but as far as small government conservatives go, he deserves a lot more credit than he ever really got as a president, just kind of reining in the progressive era of Woodrow Wilson, and setting up America for better success, setting up conservatism too with a good framework, I think, from which to operate. So those are certainly a few of my favorites. And look, I think Trump did a lot of really great things during his presidency. I think that has to be said as well. There's a lot of accomplishments over the last 4 years from a policy perspective that put America in a great place. Now, quite unlucky with a global pandemic in his last year in office, and
unlucky.
And I think is both unlucky. I think that his personality, I think, got in the way of his own reelection.
Yeah, so do I. You don't have any suspicion that pandemic was on purpose by the Chinese government?
All of our investigations show that it was. And I think what was done on purpose by the Chinese government was attempts to cover it up. So I think they purposefully screwed us. But I don't think they wanted to. And the science also indicates that it doesn't seem to have come from the labs, and certainly not purposefully come from the labs, and that it was a natural virus. So no, I don't think so.
Okay, and the last question, because I know I told you an hour. It's been an hour and 10 minutes. I appreciate your time. I know you got shit to do. Aliens. You start to see things coming out where the old government's releasing alien files. In your opinion, or do you know anything where you would say, are there aliens?
I don't know anything. I don't know anything more than you know. But it is fascinating. I mean, it seems to be incontrovertible evidence. Of the footage from the Navy, the testimonies. It really is something that we should be looking into, frankly, a little bit more than I'm aware that we are. I don't see how to deny the evidence that we've seen. What was crazy to me was how that evidence came out or at least it was formally acknowledged by the DOD this past year. Nobody cared. Like, I was like, that's the sign of bad times in America, where it's like, hey, aliens are over here, and everybody's like, I don't care. COVID. It was pretty fascinating.
And if someone who wanted to get involved, again, where do they go and donate up to $2,800 for you?
Well, Crenshaw for Congress is the place to do that. And then, if you want to listen to my podcast, it's called Hold These Truths. You can follow me on Instagram at Dan Crenshaw TX, and I'm obviously on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. So we put out a lot of content. Just before this, I was recording another podcast. So we try to, again, like talking about roles in Congress, like I focus on a few select policies: healthcare, energy, national security, and I'm constantly trying to communicate with people. So we've developed almost a separate media company, and it's important to do because it's definitely the way of the future. So you can find me in a lot of places.
Attention is vital, especially in politics. Folks, go follow Mr. Dan Crenshaw at Dan Crenshaw TX on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook is Rep Dan Crenshaw. You can also go get his book. I got his book. I'm just getting it started. It's Fortitude. It's anywhere books are sold. I got the Audible version. I highly recommend it, what I've heard so far. I'm going to be finishing it this week. I really appreciate you taking time out to pop on here. And just remember, dude, I think one of these days we're going to see Dan Crenshaw as president. And if there ever is, man, reach out to an old friend and invite me to the White House. Deal? Fair enough? Uh-oh. We didn't lose him.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I think my computer ran out of juice. Thought it was plugged in. I guess it was not. So anyway.
Hey, I appreciate your time. If I can do anything for you, let me know. Reach out. Whatever I can do to help you. I'll make sure I get this a lot of coverage and boost it till it gets a lot of press, extra footage. And then, again, if I can help you, reach out. I appreciate you agreeing to it.
Hey, thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun.
My pleasure, man. Kick ass. Thanks for your service. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
Peace. So listen, that was Congressman Dan Crenshaw. You can go get his book, Amazon, Fortitude. You can go donate, make sure he gets reelected, or you can just follow him on Instagram at Dan Crenshaw TX, or Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, Rep Dan Crenshaw. Hope you pick something up from this. Make sure that you guys share this out. Leave comments, go rate and review the podcast, and until next time, keep it real.
Dropping bombs with the real Brad Lee. Subscribe now.